وقالوا كونوا هودا أو نصارى تهتدوا قل بل ملة إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين
তারা বলে, তোমরা ইহুদি অথবা খ্রিস্টান হয়ে যাও, তবেই সুপথ পাবে। আপনি বলুন, কখনই নয়, বরং আমরা ইব্রাহিমের ধর্মে আছি, যাতে বক্রতা নেই। সে মুশরিকদের অন্তর্ভুক্ত ছিল না।
আউযু বিল্লাহি মিনাশ শাইতানির রাজীম। وقالوا كونوا هودا أو نصارى تهتدوا قل بل ملة إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين قولوا آمنا بالله وما أنزل إلينا وما أنزل إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وما أوتي موسى وعيسى وما أوتي النبيون من ربهم لا نفرق بين أحد منهم ونحن له مسلمون فإن آمنوا بمثل ما آمنتم به فقد اهتدوا وإن تولوا فإنما هم في شقاق فسيكفيكهم الله وهو السميع العليم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We're at ayah number 135 of Surah Al-Baqarah. The preceding discussion, Allah Azza wa Jal reminded us of the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Yaqub alayhi salam, and now He turns to those who claim to have an allegiance with Him, and one of the things they say to Muslims, and one of the claims that they make, this is referring to both the Jews and the Christians at the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. وَقَالُوا كُونُوا هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى تَهْتَدُوا. And they said, be Jews or Christians and you'll be considered guided. And tahtadu means, that would mean that you are committed to guidance. But you have to be at least one of these two. What's interesting is in each of their own theologies, they believe the other is damned to hell. They actually don't like each other. But when it came into their animosity against Muslims, then they would actually unify forces and say, you know what, we're willing to work with these two. This would still be considered somewhat guidance. This third one, forget it. Out of the picture, not to be considered at all. قُلْ بَلْ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا. And Allah tells them to say, no, rather, you should be saying, if you want to say be this or be that, then كُونُوا مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. Then be the nation of Ibrahim, the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The word millah, actually a very interesting word, is different from ummah. We talked about ummah before, but the word millah is a term that actually has in affinity, love and affection. So if you really show affinity and love and affection to Ibrahim alayhi salam, then you should be part of his legacy, Hanifan. And this Hanifan, it can go both ways. It could be a description of Ibrahim alayhi salam, or it could be hal of millah, meaning be a nation that is completely focused on one thing. And at the same time, it's kind of an example of wordplay where even Ibrahim alayhi salam, one of his adjectives is that he was Hanif, that he was completely and solely focused. Hanif and Hanafiya is actually when you're not distracted by anything else. You have one thing in front of you and you're completely devoted and dedicated to that one thing. And Ibrahim alayhi salam is called Hanif because he had no distraction except pleasing Allah Azza wa Jal, submitting before Allah Azza wa Jal. Nothing else came in his way. No, the biggest things that you would think would turn you away from submitting to Allah didn't get in his way in submitting to Allah. So he's saying, if you really want to be considered those who are guided, committed to guidance, then no, the call would be to be like Ibrahim alayhi salam. Then the question then is, why is Allah telling the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam to call on Ibrahim alayhi salam? Why not just himself? The first thing is, he says, قُل. You should be telling them to commit to the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam. But did they know about Ibrahim alayhi salam already, both of these groups? They did. They both knew about it. But now it's like they're being told, actually, you need to learn about what Ibrahim alayhi salam is really like at the hands of this man, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And they're being called to something not new. By calling on Ibrahim alayhi salam, they're being called to something that they've already agreed to. That they look at Ibrahim alayhi salam as a role model. It's not something new. بَلْ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And he wasn't from the people who did shirk at all. There's a very important concept in the Quran. Ma kana min al-mushrikeen. Ma in Arabic, as the Arabic students here know, is actually different from lam or la in Arabic or laysa in Arabic. It's a unique kind of saying no. It's actually when you say no in response to somebody. Like somebody says something wrong and you respond by saying, somebody says, kana huna, he was here. You say, no he wasn't here. When you're correcting them, you say, ma kana huna. The correct response then is not lam yakun huna. That's not the correct response. Actually, the correct response is ma kana huna. He wasn't here at all. No, you're wrong. So it's when you're correcting someone and saying no, classically, that's when ma is used. So when Allah says ma kana min al-mushrikeen, this is actually important because it affirms the idea that some people thought that he had been a mushrik, that he had done some shirk. By Allah saying ma kana min al-mushrikeen, what Allah is saying is he had never ever done shirk at all. That's the other thing. Ma is aqwa, min aqwa uslub, an-nafi. It's from the strongest forms of negation. So Allah is saying, first of all, you're wrong, he never did shirk, he didn't do shirk, and he didn't do shirk at all. But then the question arises, well, isn't there passages in the Quran too, where he looked at the sun and said, Hada Rabbi, Hada Akbar? And then when the sun went down, he said, okay, la uhibbul, as-safilin, and things like that. So there's this whole mukalama, there's muhadatha, this whole conversation, where he's going and discovering all of these different questions, and finally he comes to Tawheed. There's a passage about that in the Quran. So how do we reconcile that and this? Well, actually it's very simple. The things he said, alayhi salam, when he pointed at the sun, when he pointed at the moon, when he pointed at different things, and he made these declarations, do you think somebody has to actually say them out loud? Or you can just think about that and move on? When somebody's actually thinking about this must be my sun because it's bright, and it's so huge, and it's so brilliant. Oh wait, it went down. Does he have to wait till sundown to say, oh okay, I just realized it goes down? Or did he already know it's going to go down? He did already, right? Every comment he made about the sun and the moon is not like he discovered that day that it goes down. The reason I'm bringing this to your attention is when we talk about Ibrahim alayhi salam, we're talking about one of the most intelligent people in history. Alayhi salam. He's a very, very intelligent human being. I mean, the way he's very sharp with his even responses. Even if you look at his conversation that's coming in this surah, in Baqarah with Namrud. And when he said, أَنَا الَّذِي أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ, I'm the one who gives life and death. Right? أَنَا أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ. And Ibrahim a.s. started by saying, رَبِّيَ الَّذِي يُحْيِي وَيُمِيتُ. He said, no, me, I do that. So he responded immediately, by the way, with the sun. قَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْتِي بِالشَّمْسِ مِنَ الْمَشْرِقِ فَأْتِي بِهَا مِنَ الْمَغْرِبِ. Immediate response. He didn't have to think about it. Very sharp. But it doesn't seem like this is very intelligent speech. Bear with me, I'll make my point in a second. That you would look at the sun and say, that's pretty good, I think I'll worship that. And by the evening you say, oh, I just realized it goes down. What he was doing in that passage, he was illustrating the stupidity of those who actually believe that. This is a means of demonstration. And this is something you find in his usloob. He demonstrates the stupidity of shirk all the time. This is part of the style of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Did he do this somewhere else also? Did he do something similar before too? Or after this also? He breaks all the idols, leaves the axe, and what does he say when they come after him and say, Ya Ibrahim, anta fa'alta hada? You did this? What does he say? Well, ask the big guy over there. I mean, you worship him, so ask him. Right? So this is a means of him making them realize how ridiculous their beliefs are. And he does that even with his apparent, presentation of a journey to Tawheed. So he's literally holding some people who have fallen into shirk, they haven't ever thought about it, by the finger and showing them how ridiculous it is. He himself never committed shirk. Even when he says, Hada Rabbi, this is a really interesting thing, that in Arabic actually, the Shams is considered feminine. It's considered feminine. But he says, Hada Rabbi, Hada Akbar. He didn't use Hadihi, he used Hada. And this is actually even to illustrate that he wasn't really talking about the sun. He wasn't really saying that either. Because that's not really how you say that in Arabic. That's not how you say it in Arabic. So very subtle clues in the legacy of Ibrahim a.s. Anyhow, Allah says, مَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. He was never ever one to do shirk at all.